supposed to be mic. Don't forget when you're sitting.
This one.
Second day of the colloquium. And I think we should start by reflecting on yesterday's proceedings. And we will do so by restating briefly and summarily what we got from yesterday's proceedings. Just to remind ourselves about what we learned on decolonization yesterday. Let me begin by saying we learned a lot about decolonization. Decolonization is a movement, decolonization is a discourse, and practices, teaching and learning practices around decolonization. And you'll agree with me that the presentations yesterday were insightful. If you recall, for example, what the Vice Chancellor said about decolonizing responsibly and the need for us to sustain decolonization movement and the decolonization discourse. And one other thing that we learned yesterday is that we need to move beyond decolonization slogans and rhetoric, and that we need to be more than just advocates and Pentecostals of decolonization, and that the decolonization discourse needs to be translated into teaching and learning practices. And I think you agree with me that the needs to accept other epistemologies as valid and legitimate. And the concept of multiple epistemologies, you see, was used in the discourses of yesterday's proceedings. And that the university needs to embrace and allow multiple epistemologies to flourish, and that we need to view other epistemologies as credible and serving the purpose of enhancing
A very good morning to all of us. Perhaps it's in order that I should thank very profoundly the organizers, of this colloquium for having, invited me to come and converse with, everybody else on this very important subject of decolonizing learning in South Africa. I do sincerely appreciate the hospitality that also, they have extended. I'm sure not only just to me, but to all of us. We deeply appreciate that. The sister, the bio you read, was prepared to impress UCT, so they employ me. And they did employ me, but I'm sure they regret that they employed me. So it's not meant to be true at all. It served its purpose, and I as I say, the unfortunate part is that I'm sure UCT now regrets that it made that decision. So what I hope to do in the next few minutes is speak to us about a subject that I've thought long about, and I've titled the presentation on the imperative of decolonizing higher education in a settler colonial society. Now, it would seem that those of us who are at the receiving end of that will in time distinguish us from those black people that actually pay lip service to the project of decolonization and actually hide the fact that they benefit from the depravity of our people. Because we're not going to be allies forever as black people when there are those that actually silently take the benefits of colonialism and the benefits of the depravity that our people suffer. And so the imperative to decolonize, in as much as it seems obvious enough, in any colonial society where education as we know it came as part of the colonial baggage. And so the question really is, why are we still expected to justify or to legitimate the need for decolonization in any settler colonial society where education as we know it came as part of the colonial baggage? Because it's obvious that if education as we know it came as part of the colonial baggage, there is need then to undo its colonial character. It's a logical thing. You know, those who teach philosophy, teach logic, it is usually white people. But when it comes to this simple logical fact, they seem to push logic out of their minds. It's a logical fact that if education in South Africa was created as a colonial instrument, therefore we must decolonize it. Why should we restate the same fact when it is a given if you use logic? But unfortunately, it's not so. We find ourselves in a situation where we must plead for our freedom again, or we must plead to decolonize. So we must plead for our freedom, for to decolonize, to reiterate the point, is to liberate the black colonized. So decolonization is not just a fancy project of conferences, it is a real societal imperative. It's an ethical project, because to decolonize would mean liberating the black colonized. So it's precisely that I'm going to try and do this morning. I'm going to try and plead the case for. It is not to cure you, because when those who work in the pharmaceutical industry do research and discover new drugs, if the drugs are not going to be profitable, whether they cure you or not, they don't put them out into the market. And so the logic of profit is that one particular way. It is in a capitalist modern industrial society that people live. People do have an option of marrying first before they go to school. There's nothing wrong with that. Thank you. But because capitalism has insisted that this is how modern life is lived, and therefore its disciplines draw their logic precisely from that. And so the point I'm emphasizing here is that modern disciplinary knowledges sit in a functional relationship with capitalism. And so they aid the development of capitalism and the sustenance of capitalism, just as capitalism aids or drives their development. So chemistry, if you think of chemistry outside of industries, what purpose does it serve in society? So at this point, must go and exploit through the Dutch East India Company and other merchant capital entities. It is right for us to go and explore these markets because they are going to offer us higher rates of returns. But there was a problem in philosophy, in Enlightenment philosophy, because Europe had norms of human ability and norms of human difference. So the question was, if you are going to go and enslave African people, when you have found for yourselves as European, and you've said for yourselves as European, never again, slavery is bad for Europe, on what basis then are you going to justify going to do it to the non-Western people? Economic theory had no answer to this. The dilemma was resolved within Enlightenment philosophy and theology. It is theologians who provided the answer and said that it was right to go and exploit and colonize those people and enslave them because they had no notion of God. Were then made fit for capitalist plunder. Now this is the logic that has underlined the development of capitalism in the non-Western world. And so because then modern disciplinary knowledges aid the development of capitalism,